You might be familiar with Jake Tapper's new book, admitting that Joe Biden was slightly more animated than a vegetable during his presidency, but you're probably not familiar with his sources.
Our good friend Mike Howell will explain why reporters' privilege can't protect the staffers who deceived the American people.
And Americans pay as much as 3 times that they do for European prescription drugs. A former congressman says that maha could be the cure for outlandish prices.
One thing's for sure, we need a cure, and that cure is going to come from the people, not Big Pharma.
And it's been 5 years since the George Floyd riots devastated our country. Our own Julio Rosas will have an exclusive interview with the Minneapolis police officers.
Yeah, I think Julio actually misses the riots, but he found a way to get back in touch with his roots.
He needs to. He misses them so much. You know what? You're not going to miss anything here. Blaze News The Mandate starts right now. Good evening and happy Friday. I'm Jill Savage, joined as always by Blaze News Editor-in-Chief Matthew Peterson.
I'm here for it today. It's a great Friday to be alive in America.
It is, absolutely. So earlier this month, not on a Friday, CNN's Jake Tapper and Axios' Alex Thompson, they released their book, Original Sin, and they exposed what they describe as the cover-up of President Biden's cognitive decline during his presidency and re-election campaign. Now, this is based on over 200 interviews with insiders, and the book goes through and alleges that Biden's inner circle concealed his deteriorating health. So here to break all this down for us is President of Oversight Project, Mike Howell. So, Mike, when we get into this, right, we look at this. Tapper and Thompson are claiming that they can't reveal their sources due to reporters' privilege. Now, we know that's true in a lot of cases, but why do you take issue with it this time in your piece for theblaze.com?
Yeah, I don't even think it's a close question. So Tapper and Thompson wrote the book in their individual capacity. So let's dispense of this notion that they were reporters for, entities like CNN or Axios. This is a financial product. Think of it more like a Netflix production. Okay, and so even if they were newsmen, as they would like to be referred to, there is the Supreme Court case from 1972, Brandsburg v. Hayes, which deals with this question directly. And it says that the newsman privilege is what they called it at the time. It wasn't gender neutral. It was the newsman's privilege. Does not apply to hiding sources and information in criminal cases. And guess what? We have what is going to be a criminal case with the cover-up of Biden's decline in the use of the autopen. DOJ has opened on it. Both the House and yesterday the Senate also announced they have opened on it, and they have different angles to get at the same thing. So all of this is to say, this is one of the easier investigations I think the government can undertake, because you have Tapper and Thompson running around the country saying they spoke to 200 people, which includes government officials, whether White House or Congress, Democrat Party strategists, etc. And all of those unnamed people that they're, flirtatiously hanging out there by saying, we know something you don't know, America, are going to become government witness lists. And so Tapper and Thompson are fact witnesses of a crime that they're profiting from by writing this book.
Mike, this is one of the most important issues right now in America in terms of getting justice for what happened in the last years. So many people in the audience just want to see someone get in trouble for doing all kinds of bad things, right, in every direction. And here we really have the tip of the spear. So, in the press tour for the book, they describe a Politburo, the insiders call it, a group of people who were, in fact, making the decisions. What do we actually know about that group? Who are these people?
So we generally know who the biggest Biden handlers were over time. You had Bob Bauer, his lawyer, Anita Dunn, also Steve Ricchetti, who is one of the lobbyists, which, what you should hear when you hear that is money man. And then clearly you have the Biden family, who were also part of the big money operation. So that's the real inner circle. Those are the individuals that Ed Martin named, who I think ultimately were the Praetorian Guard surrounding Joe Biden. And then you also have the White House officials that executed duties on behalf of, the office of the president, the incapacitated president, but they were using the office of the president's power. And on that list, you have the people who handle the paper inside the White House, a role called staff secretary. You've seen the guy, Will Scharf, who hands President Trump all the documents that he actually signs. Well, the Biden administration had a version of that person, Neera Tanden, who is a Soros operative. And so officials like that will be kind of the instrumental arms of implementing whatever decisions were made by the handlers of Joe Biden. And it seems like, from what Tapper and Thompson are implying, they know all those names and they don't have a right to withhold those names. And I hope that they are called before Congress. And if they refuse to give up information about this, they deserve the same treatment that Steve Bannon got when he did not cooperate with Congress, which is jail time. So if that's a hill Jake Tapper wants to die on for some principled reason that doesn't even apply here, that's where this could end up if he does not cooperate with this. And Congress, as a final point, has a massive interest in this. Congress obviously isn't law enforcement. Their power to get information stems from their oversight power, which means it needs to, reference potential legislation or, things that Congress can do. And what we're really talking about here at the end of the day is the 25th Amendment. The Biden White House and their handlers refused to invoke it. After Kennedy was assassinated, a lot of thought and unification of the country came together to basically set up a process to deal with what happens when we don't have a president, someone who's either been assassinated, incapacitated, or otherwise can't carry out their duties. And the Biden administration decided, and their handlers decided, not to use the 25th Amendment. And they used a scheme to get around it, which essentially, involves the autopen device, which has become the real talk of the town. And so Congress may need to revisit the 25th Amendment, and that is the height of their legal power to obtain information, documents, testimony, which means Thompson and Tapper should be sitting in depositions before them. They hopefully should cooperate. They're trying to sound like they're apologetic now for their cover-up. Let's see if they mean what they say and are willing to come clean about one of the biggest, not only media scandals in our country, but I think the biggest constitutional scandal that we operated without a president for so long.
Yeah, I've heard about that auto pen stuff, mainly from the Oversight Project. Interesting enough. So we talk about Jake Tapper and that he knew all these people. Of course he knew all these people, but yet he went out every night and presented himself like, oh, Joe Biden is still a great president, right? We heard from Karine Jean-Pierre, oh, he's so fit, he's running circles around us. So how does a person like Jake Tapper, who presented this version of Joe Biden to the country day in and day out, how is he now the one that's sitting back there and able to write this book? And everybody's just like, well, this seems very logical. Yes, Jake Tapper, we must now believe him.
Yeah, I think the best analogy here is a sports one, so you'll like it. He's the O.J. Simpson of the media. You remember O.J. Simpson wrote that book, What If I Did It?, where he made all of that money, and it was like one of the most unethical and just like terrible things anyone's ever done in terms of selling books. I think Tapper is replacing O.J. Simpson in terms of what he's doing with this book and basically writing about everything he already knew and helped cover up. And I think it's really, really unfortunate for a lot of friends and people we like in conservative media that it's a content-heavy environment. You want to talk about the top things, and they're helping Jake Tapper sell his book by having him on to talk about these limited hangouts of information he's willing to share. And so what they're really doing is rewarding the cover-up, and Jake Tapper particularly, who is profiting from the cover-up, along with Alex Thompson. Now, Alex Thompson's kind of his little sidekick from Axios, and Axios likes to hide behind, well, we wrote a few bad things about Biden along the way, which is just not true whatsoever. You go back, they got every major thing wrong. They didn't discuss the CCP ownership of the Biden family. They were wrong on the Her report. They were wrong on virtually every major issue, just like Biden has been wrong on every major issue. And they're just essentially a commercial entity. If you look at their webpage, it looks like a NASCAR. It's slapped with the logos of Amazon and all these big pharma companies. I don't view them as any sort of legitimate news enterprise. And I certainly don't view the book and what Tapper and Thompson have done to be anything approaching some First Amendment protected activity that gets you protection from a criminal investigation. Now, this is a very ugly get-rich-quick scheme for very unethical people.
So, I mean, just it is, the whole thing is mind-boggling to me in many ways, right? But first, there's specific crimes that you're talking about. You lay out in this article, from false impersonation of a federal officer, deprivation of civil rights, forgery, conspiracy to exercise presidential power without authority, to treason going on here. And yet Tapper goes out apparently to write this book, as you point out, and you say you make this point often, as a private matter, right? Not as journalist, in order to make money. What else is going on here? I'm a very suspicious man.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you are suspicious, but this one's just patently obvious. Mm-hmm. I mean, think of another analogy of, say, someone wrote a book about another type of crime, say a murder, a rape, and said they knew all the details about it and they were just going to, not share any more information that could help criminal investigators solve it. That's the principle at play here. We're talking about real crimes. They're not just political crimes. They're not just crimes of lying or moral crimes. By the way, those are the types of things that in other countries basically get political parties banned for their entirety, and in other countries. That is the level of deceit and lying that happened over the course of this. But beyond the realm of the earthly and the moral and the other crimes they had committed, there are legal crimes. Okay, and we cite to a bunch of them in that article, which is by no means comprehensive. But we're talking about elements of forgery. When you're talking about how certain decisions came to be made, you're talking potentially about bribery. You're talking about impersonation of a government official. You're talking about any range of things that touch on basically fraud. You're talking about a lot of money moving around and a lot of people who stood to benefit financially from those decisions. And then there's also going to be crimes of the non-compliance in these investigations. And, we saw that a lot in January 6th investigations. Reporters went to jail. One of them is our good friend Steve Baker, who was arrested over his reporting. And so let's not pretend there's not a precedent for this type of using government investigations to compel information in these areas. And I'm not saying we're pretending, but I'm saying that to the Tapper and Thompson. They're stepping into a lot of recent precedent that applies directly to them. And I think it's far more serious in the underlying subject matter than anything the Biden administration tried going after, whether it was COVID related or January 6th. We're talking about one of the biggest scandals in American history, and a lot of people who broke a lot of laws in implementing it over a long period of time.
So, Mike, last question for you. Let's bring the rest of the family into this, right? Hunter, Jill, they love being a part of any other story. So let's go ahead and bring them into this one. What role were they playing when all of this was happening?
Yeah, so Joe Biden's initial role was a campaign aide for Joe Biden back in the day, who cheated on her husband with Joe Biden, and then Joe Biden caused a divorce. That's how Joe Biden enters the picture decades and decades ago, and the media never really reported that, but I'll just drop that little factoid for our viewers here. But her role up into present day as the matriarch of the Biden family was obviously a very central figure in the way that the Bidens got very rich off of their government positions for a very long time. And also the way in which the entirety of the law enforcement apparatus refused to look at clear crimes that the Bidens were committing on an ongoing basis. And I'm talking about during the Obama years, the intermediate years where Trump 1 was in office, and even during the Biden White House, where their crimes related primarily to basically helping execute this conspiracy to assert presidential authority without a president. And so Joe was there for all of it, is an absolutely key fact witness the government should speak to. And I expect that you can't do this type of investigation without also having her sit down for it. And again, a lot of precedent here for this. Look at Donald Trump Jr. He sat in front of interviews with the Senate Intelligence Committee for days. Look at Melania Trump. They raided her bedroom over something absolutely frivolous that turned out to be a complete hoax-based investigation. And so Joe Biden, her testimony is critical, as are the other Biden family members, many of whom received the very patently, obviously, auto-penned, funky, bad, no good pardons in the final days.
I love a good factoid. Mike Howell is full of them. Go read the article at theblaze.com. And Mike, bring the heat every time. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with more right after this. before you know it, another family farm could shut down, and it's not going to be from a lack of hard work. It's because over 85% of the grass-fed beef that's sold in the United States, it's not from here. It actually comes in from overseas, and shoppers have no idea. That's why you need to go to goodranchers.com, because you know it's 100% American. It's born, raised, and harvested right here. So you're actually supporting real family farms. So switch now to Good Ranchers because it's tariff-proof. Everything's made in America. Grocery store prices, you never know what you're going to get. But with Good Ranchers, their prices stay consistent. So when you subscribe, you can get your free meat for life. You can choose between Wagyu burgers, hot dogs, bacon, or wings in every box. Plus, get an extra $40 off with my code Jill. Now, tariffs, it's not going to touch this, but this deal is not going to last forever. GoodRanchers.com. Go there today. It's GoodRanchers.com, promo code Jill. Good Ranchers, American meat delivered. RFK Jr.'s Maha report drew a wide array of criticism. If you watch Blaze News Mandate, you know that many of the flack was actually financed by corporations. So here to explain Big Pharma's stranglehold on Capitol Hill is J.D. Hayworth. He's the former House Ways and Means Committee chairman, and he's a spokesperson for Pharmaceutical Reform Alliance. So J.D., thanks so much for joining us here on the show tonight.
Jill, it's great to be with you and Matt. One friendly amendment. As much as I wished I had been the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, I was a senior member by the time I left, but departed before I was able to grab the gavel. But it's wonderful to be with you both. And yes, the influence game and big money is at work. It's one of the reasons we call it Big Pharma.
Well, duly noted. So let's get into this Maha report. So what is it exposing about the pharmaceutical drug companies? Let's start there.
Well, it exposes what Secretary Kennedy said in another forum. And by the way, let me just pause here and note all the talk about bipartisanship and nonpartisanship. Isn't it amazing that President Trump, who still speaks with kind of a New York state of mind, with what some would call rough edges, isn't it interesting that he's put together this coalition? I mean, can you imagine 18 months ago thinking that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. would be part of the Trump administration? But as Secretary Kennedy pointed out, he said Big Pharma is spending so much dough, they could have a lobbyist devoted personally to all 435 members of the House, all 100 United States senators, and all 9 members of the United States Supreme Court. Here's what we know from the report. I'll leave the medical information to public health experts, but you asked about what's going on in terms of influence. We know that roughly over a 20-year period, and to be candid, beginning about the time I was still in Congress, on through 2019, Big Pharma doled out what? Something like 13 billion, with a B, for lobbying and efforts to influence. As I recall, just under what, 6 billion directly involved in dealing with political spending and spending on the Hill, I should say, lobbying and all of that. And then over that same close to 2-decade period, another big multi-billion-dollar expenditure for the creation of civic and political groups, a type of what some would consider grassroots, but were being financed by Big Pharma and its big money. And you know what I think is important, and this again is something that I think people may miss. No doubt, as I've been in the anchor chair at different places or on talk radio, we all look at election years. Last year, we called it the most polarizing election in our history. Well, the Kaiser Family Foundation did a poll that found that 89% of Republicans, 84% of Democrats, 78%, close to 80% of independents all believe that Big Pharma is more interested in profits really than public health. So when you have those kinds of numbers, the White House and Secretary Kennedy are working to make America healthy again, and that means directly confronting Big Pharma, because Americans are paying close to what, 3 times what our Canadian neighbors, what our British cousins, heck, what even people down under in the developed world are paying for their prescription drugs.
JD, I know that the Federal Trade Commission is also concerned with this this difference in charging. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, Matt, as you point out, and this is something else, because I think you always hear getting down in the weeds can be dangerous, but here's what you need to know about the president's executive order about most favored nation status. When you strip it all away, it's to make America the most favored nation by saying to the other parts of the developed world, you guys need to pay your fair share. But of course, an executive order, the president empowers executive agencies, including the Federal Trade Commission. And as we get together here, I guess it was now, 8 days ago, the big conference involving Secretary Kennedy and President Trump and others involved in our nation's public health. It was pointed out on that same day, the Federal Trade Commission went to the pharmaceutical companies saying, look, we're wise to you in terms of what you are doing to delay the procedures within intellectual and property rights to actually keep drugs away from going to their generic status where they would be cheaper. So the FTC is taking a long look at untangling some of those legal tactics that delay the freeing of patents and intellectual property to let generics come to the market and thereby lower prices for Americans that much sooner.
So we see the maha movement. Everybody's getting behind it. It was part of the big coalition that got Donald Trump elected. You know how things work in Washington, D.C. So what do you want to see? What are the next steps here as we go through all of these budget negotiations that they're doing right now on the Hill? What do you want to see? What should people be looking for?
Well, obviously, the president's executive order is an incredibly encouraging first step. And the efforts by Secretary Kennedy and others to reform public health and basically say to Big Pharma, your days of ruling the roost are over. And understand, Big Pharma has had the run not only of Washington, D.C., but the pricing mechanisms. At the start of this year, we changed the calendar, and suddenly you saw massive increases in over 800 prescription drug medicines, often certainly outpacing the rate of inflation, even as bad as it was in the final days of the Biden administration. So this entire movement is built on a grand coalition. And as the poll results I shared with you from the Kaiser Family Foundation in that polarized election year where everybody says we have to do something, I just recall, I guess it was Benjamin Disraeli, way back during his days as British Prime Minister. I must follow the people. After all, am I not their leader? And that's what President Trump and Secretary Kennedy are doing. They're saying, look at the groundswell and the true grassroots. The American people want to end Big Pharma's price increases. The American people are tired of paying, and this is just on average 3 times as much as our counterparts in the rest of the developed world. And so that is where it starts. And when that happens, as President Reagan famously said about those of us who served in the House, when members of Congress and the Senate feel the heat, they eventually see the light. And that's why I'd invite those who are watching us get together to check out the website, pharmareformalliance.com, because truly bipartisan pieces of legislation introduced in the House and in the Senate move to really enact the basic points of the president's executive order and continue with the theme that Secretary Kennedy advocates of making America healthy again. The bottom line is we got to put America first because Big Pharma thus far has put America last.
JD, it's a breath of fresh air. I mean, and like you say, this is a popular issue among all Americans for good reason. And I'm so tired of hearing strange free market arguments when this isn't a free market at all. But the one obstacle that you have is that the people are with this movement. They're with Maha. But as you know, and you could see even in the response to the Maha report, the Big Pharma has money and they are going to use it in this battle. So what are they, play that out for us because they're just starting, right, to attack.
Well, here is something that we need to note from the political campaigns of Donald Trump and from campaigns in which I was involved. Grassroots beats greenbacks every time. Now understand, on the Hill, there is great reluctance before really studying an issue and seeing where people stand, Matt. It's like the old joke of one of my counterparts from my native North Carolina on a controversial issue. He was asked, "Where do you stand, Congressman?" He said, "Well, some of my friends are for it and some of my friends are against it, and I'm going to side with my friends." What the American people have to do is say, look, it is a money issue, but not a money issue of political influence. It's what we're paying in terms of high drug prices, much more than what's being paid by other nations in the developed world, on average, 3 times as much. And even that kind of understates it for certain drugs. The American people have had it. That's why it's important they contact their member of Congress, their United States senator, and tell them, look, here's a chance to truly do something bipartisan. We're not going to abuse that term and have one side or the other use this. Matt, we're discovering this is not a Republican issue. This is not a Democrat issue. It's an American issue. And given the level of support, I don't believe there is any way that Congress can turn its back on joining with the president and those who want to end the incredible inflation and big prices demanded by Big Pharma.
JD, give us that website one more time.
You betcha. PharmaReformAlliance.com.
We are all about making America healthy again. Thanks so much for your time. Great conversation.
Great to be with you, Matt. Good to be with you, too. Hope you'll have me back again soon.
Absolutely. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll have our own Julio Rosas joining us right after this. If you need some plans this weekend, there's a great story about grit and redemption and old-fashioned family values that's hitting the big screen. You don't want to miss it. It comes from Angel Studios. You know them from The Sound of Freedom and The King of Kings. Now they have The Last Rodeo. It's an action-packed story about a retired rodeo legend who straps back in for one last ride, and he's going to risk it all to save his grandson. He's the oldest rider to ever enter the arena, and the movie is all about healing broken bonds, facing the past, and proving that real courage means fighting for the people that you love. And it's raw and it's heartfelt, and tickets are selling out fast. So hurry up and order your tickets now. Go to angel.com/Jill to get your seats for The Last Rodeo. It's in theaters everywhere right now. So go get your tickets today at angel.com/Jill. That's angel.com/Jill. 5 years after the 3rd precinct burned down during the BLM riots, Minneapolis cops are breaking their silence. In exclusive interviews with Blaze Media's national correspondent, Julio Rosas, they exposed the chaos, abandonment, and political failures since that night. So Julio joins us now. So let's go through this. Let's start with actually going through and tracking down these officers. How difficult was that? Were they just like, okay, you know what? It's been long enough, Julio. We'll go ahead and talk to you now.
Well, yeah, not to get into too much detail, but these officers have come to trust me, and they did so because they for one, they know that I was outside the 3rd precinct 5 years ago, which is hard to believe it's been that long. And they've obviously seen my coverage of the riots. They see my coverage of covering crime in the United States after the defund the police movement and after the rise in the Soros DAs and all that. And so they've been wanting to talk for a while, just because understandably they haven't been able to say much publicly. Obviously they talk amongst themselves and people that they trust and their families, but especially during that time, the narrative was so dead set against them, right? I mean, when the initial video of George Floyd came out, it was set in stone before these guys even realized what was happening and what was about to happen. And so the reason why these interviews were so, in my opinion, critical to understand what happened and what's happened since then is because these guys are still in the police department. A lot of the people that have spoken out since the riots are officers who are no longer in the department, which is why they have more freedom to speak publicly. But in my opinion, I think it's significant to hear from the unvarnished truth from people who are still dealing with the aftermath of these riots day to day, especially in a police department that's so heavily scrutinized locally and nationally.
And Julio, we will get into that aftermath, but there are a number of interesting aspects to these interviews. One of them being the fact that they weren't given reinforcements at the time all this was going on. Why do they believe that was the case?
Yeah, I mean, again, speaking for, as someone who was out there, it was clear that they were not being reinforced. And so the natural conclusion, or one might assume, okay, well, they have the officers inside the 3rd precinct that they think is necessary to hold it. And the other officers in the police department have been staged around the city to in case more rioting or more looting breaks out in those areas. But what I can tell you is that there were officers who were stationed miles away, and in some cases outside the city. And that hearing that 5 years later is so crazy, because you would think, okay, well, if you're going to have officers not be at the 3rd precinct, at least have them inside the actual city limits, or not miles away, not on the complete opposite side of the city, who are doing nothing. I was told that there were cases where when these officers were ready to get onto their shift, who were not at the 3rd precinct, and they were getting ready to go, and they were given the order to go, and they're gearing up, and they're being told, no, what are you doing? They said, well, we thought we were going to the 3rd precinct. And they said, no, you're going home. And so it was a complete mismanagement of personnel. Again, obviously, are you going to send the entire police force to the 3rd precinct? No, but there could have been way more officers sent to help reinforce it. And they held it for a very long time against the odds. The reason why these officers told me that they thought that the leadership, the city and state leadership, made those decisions was because they wanted to give the rioters a sacrifice, essentially. They wanted them to have this victory in the hopes of placating their anger, and in the hopes that, okay, you have the 3rd precinct, now just go home and stop your attacks, which of course is a completely idiotic line of thinking. But that's what ended up happening, right? And we saw the 5th precinct, which is actually on that same street, Lake Street in South Minneapolis. It's a couple miles to the west, and that was in danger of being overrun and being burned, because understandably the rioters thought, oh, we conquered one station, let's go to the next and the next and the next. And if they didn't put their foot down at that point, the city leadership and the leadership within the police department, easily, the entire city could have been overwhelmed, and all police stations would have been set on fire.
Yeah, we actually have a clip, I know, of the overrun station, how they were trying to go through and demoralize and delegitimize some of the police. Let's go ahead and take a watch.
He said the moment the precinct was given up, he said, you basically ripped the shoulder patches and the badges off of every cop in the city. You've completely delegitimized our job and our mission and what we do on the streets. Still, to this day, people blow through stop lights with a squad right at the intersection because it's a complete disregard for the police officers.
And you guys can't really do anything about that.
No.
Julio, that's so impactful that even 5 years later, they're still seeing the ramifications there from those protests.
I saw that. I distinctly remember leaving my hotel after the third precinct was burned in downtown Minneapolis. So I was in downtown Minneapolis, making my way back south, and we're in the heart of the city, and this guy just rolls past a stoplight. And I remember that because I'm thinking, okay, well, yeah, people are seeing other people break the law in such a big way that, of course, that people who may not do that, they're just going to think, okay, well, I can just run through the stoplight. And believe it or not, I actually saw that a few times when I went back to Minneapolis to record these interviews. So, like, yeah, this is still very much a real thing. And it is, leads into the broken windows theory, where if you don't stop this, someone breaking a window, it's going to lead to, worse things. And so it is an absolute travesty, and it is just really just idiotic thinking from the city leadership and the state, with Governor Tim Walz, thinking that if they gave up a precinct that there weren't going to be any negative long-term effects. I understand that there was the concern of, well, we can't have an officer be killed, we can't have a member of the general public be killed, i.e. a rioter. But as soon as they gave up that precinct, and I've told you guys this before, it just sent the worst message that they could have sent to the rioters, which is, you do actually have this power to run us out of our own bases, our own stations. And we saw, and especially in the immediate aftermath, we saw kind of repeated instances in Seattle and Portland. And then, of course, then it's just the regular criminal element just became so emboldened after that. And so this is why it's important to really understand the failures that happened down there, especially hearing it from these guys, because the impacts were far reaching. And yeah, we're still very much dealing with that low intensity level, that low level intensity of lawlessness in a lot of cities across the country, just because what happened in Minneapolis was the turning point, and how policing is done in the United States. There is kind of a, because since the pendulum swung so far in one direction, it is kind of coming back, but only in some areas, right? Particularly, conservative areas, but especially in big liberal cities, 5 years later, I think it's safe to say that people haven't really woken up to how dumb these progressive policies that were being pushed at the time were.
So 60 seconds left. A question that I don't even want to ask, but I have to, because I think I know the answer. Was anyone at all punished? I mean, it seems like the only thing that happened to Tim Walz was rewarded by being named a vice presidential candidate. But was there any sort of punishment or accountability for any of this 5 years later?
From the city and the officials? No. I mean, not that I'm aware of. I mean, it's just crazy, because you're right, and that's why I asked about Walz to these officers, and they understandably they said, we know his leadership style, and especially in a moment of crisis, he completely failed to act decisively to try to get control of the city. And the mayor, Jacob Frey, he's actually running for a third term, and like a lot of cities, like a lot of liberal cities, they're stuck between this guy who's very weak, but he's considered the moderate, and then you have all these like people that are even further to the left that are basically communists. That, okay, well, you definitely don't want them in office, so kind of the moderate approach is, well, we're gonna have to reelect this guy, even though he's far from what is needed. So, from my perspective, and from especially what I've seen, take place in that city over the past 5 years, no one's really been held accountable.
I don't know when riot season will kick back up, but I do know that when it does, you'll be there. Julio Rosas, thanks so much.
Thanks.
We'll be back to wrap up the show right after this. We know that conservatives are winning right now, and we love all of the winning, but we still have a long ways to go. And that's why Blaze TV exists. We have all the bold voices and the great reporting, Come join us. When you subscribe, you're not just watching Blaze TV, you're standing with a movement, and you can get it for $8 a month when you use the code BNT at checkout. So go to blazetv.com/BNT right now. Use the promo code BNT to save $20 off an annual plan. So let's keep winning together. Blaze TV, unfiltered, unafraid, on demand. Well, if you really think about it, there are two types of Republicans. On one side, you have the Mitt Romneys of the world, which nobody wants, who say that two parties have the policy disagreements. But in the end, we're all playing for the same team. Then you have the Donald Trumps, who said this in our clip of the week.
And I think we have an amazing, if we pull this off, remember, we have 0 Democrat votes because they're bad people. There's something wrong with them. You know, they'll let people pour into our country. Single biggest problem is we had 21 million people pour into our country, probably higher than that. And they're people that weren't supposed to be here. And many of those people are bad. Murderers, drug dealers, the mentally insane. They were closing mental institutions all over the world, not South America, all over the world. They're coming into our country and we're getting them out. And we're having a hard time because some judges aren't making it very easy for us. And it's tough enough. They approved that. They allowed that to happen to our country.
See, I voted for that. I needed these type of speeches to come back into the White House. So is it true? Do we have a United States, or we know Democrats are actively trying to sink the ship, right?
Yeah. So first, you're noted by the point you voted for it, and we all voted for it. And one of the things that Donald Trump has done, and because everyone made fun of him, all the intellectuals kind of sort of downplayed him, is he brought back something really important to rhetoric on the right, and that is a language of morality and justice. And you can try to make things about policy in politics. You can try to make things about spreadsheets. You can try to make things about white papers. But at the end of the day, politics is always about good and bad, what people think is just and unjust. And as it turns out, we profoundly disagree about those things. But you hope when you have a country that you can agree on certain basic things, certain basic principles of justice that you're trying to reach out for. So like when America is healthy, we debate and one side says, well, that's unjust. That's not. But it's not a principled issue, a core issue. What he's talking about is this is what citizenship means. We disagree on that as a country. You can't keep a country over time if you disagree on what citizenship means, what the nation means, what men and women are. These are really serious issues. So he brought back this language of morality, and there's no papering over the fact, even though we're all feeling good right now because Republicans won and Trump won, that this is a deeply, deeply divided nation.
It's a breath of fresh air. And with the Donald Trump win, that brought in new people into the administration. And one of those people, it's been the long goodbye. It's Elon Musk. President Trump and Elon today had a joint press conference in the Oval Office. So let's go ahead and look at some of the highlights.
Mr. Musk, what do you think would be easier, colonizing Mars or making the government efficient?
It's a tough call. But I think colonizing Mars and making life multiplanetary is harder.
There is a New York Times report today that accuses you of blurring the line between...
Is the New York Times, is that the same publication that got a Pulitzer Prize for false reporting on the Russiagate? Is it the same organization?
I think it is.
I think it is. I think the judge just ruled against the New York Times for their lies about the Russiagate hoax, and that they might have to give back that Pulitzer Prize. That New York Times, let's move on.
I can't get enough of that, right? Like just the interactions that Trump and Elon have, and just the way that they are going through and just speaking openly and freely with the media. Of course, we're doing the long goodbye with Elon Musk. So is this going to be, it can't be, tell me it's not the last that we're going to see of Elon in the administration?
I'm almost irrational about this because regardless, I cannot let myself believe that this is the end, the long goodbye. It's still a big, beautiful relationship. And Elon was so important to everything that's happened so far. So I just don't want it to end either. But for reasons we talked about yesterday, I mean, without Elon, you do not have X, you do not have free speech back. You do not have a sign to a lot of pissed off elites in America that it's okay. Some of the big dogs are going to break from the Borg and actually support Trump. That happened particularly in tech. And really, he's a guy who strives for excellence. He's trying to do great things. And so it made clear to people, this was not just some low rent, grubby populist movement movement of the pores, as they say arrogantly on the coast. This is for everybody. It's real, it's serious, and the people are right, and you need to follow them. And Elon is nothing other than a man of the people in many ways. So all of that's important. He's done all that. But here's why I think rationally this can't end. It can't end because of what we said earlier, Jill, right? America is deeply divided. So you don't really have a choice. If Elon wants to go to Mars, and he knows this, I think he does think it's harder, that job. I think he actually does think that, because that's why he's taking that task on. Like, that's the goal of his life, right? And that is the overarching goal, is to become an interplanetary species. But in order to do that, he still knows the necessary but not sufficient condition is that you have to defeat the wokeness and defeat the administrative state and reform American government, and therefore, save the world. This is really what he thinks is going on. So he can't actually just walk away and leave. He's still on team, on side, and will probably be fighting in many different ways. And the hope is that they have set up a system where Doge isn't going to go away, and he's still going to be around. But the man does have a few other things to focus on, like several other large companies that are doing some interesting things.
We are going to see Republicans continue to fight. We know the divide is still there. Last night, I actually saw a John Cornyn campaign commercial, right? It wasn't officially a Cornyn one, but it was a group, a PAC that was doing it on behalf of Cornyn. And the commercial was like, John Cornyn votes with Donald Trump 99% of the time. Now, let me tell you, America, this is going to be a long battle here in the state of Texas, because Ken Paxton is going to be challenging and primarying John Cornyn. And we are thankful for that, because this is part of the divide that we see amongst the Republicans right now. And hopefully people on the better side win.
Yeah, look, this fight is not about Republican versus Democrat. This fight is about maha, MAGA versus everyone else. And many of those people are Republicans. So the importance of this race nationally, which you should follow no matter where you are, is, can red state America, in one of the biggest red state, can it overturn the establishment Republican uniparty agenda? Can Cornyn still fake it or not? And Paxton is nothing other than a fighter. He faced down the entire establishment of the country club in Texas, basically gave them all the finger when they tried to attack him, and won. He would not hesitate to put people in prison if he was AG of the United States of America who deserve it. This is a guy who's not going to lay down. He's coming in fighting. So the question is, have these states proceed? They have to progress to become redder? They have, by all accounts, but we want to see that actually happen. So the sign of success and the sign of the electorate and all of you out there turning, it will be in this primary race.
We may need to make sure that, the Bush Republicans, the Mitt Romney Republicans, those days are gone. We need to put those in the rear view mirror. Another person that we've called out on the show before is Senator Thom Tillis. Hopefully things get going there over in Carolina. But there is progress still to be made, even if we have won, even if things are going our way. A lot of work left to be done.
Because as we see every day in the show, if Congress is still the way it is, it's very difficult to get anything done. And we have to have people in Congress who don't care about the system and want to attack it. So, this is an ongoing battle that is all about actually implementing the mandate.
You mean we can't just talk about Doge cuts? We actually have to cut spending? No, we want to have our cake and eat it too, and fund all of our pork projects. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday.
It's going to be a beautiful weekend.